Bam! A hard push on my back sent me crashing to the floor of the shed. You cheeky wife, cool your head down there. The floor felt cool. The steel figurines were cold from the night air. It was hard on my bare feet. I turned around to see my mother-in-law looking down at me. Her eyes were colder than the midwinter air. She didn't see me as a person, despite being a wife. How dare you sneak out of the house just because you can't stand my guidance? Don't be so selfish after being married once. I've reached my limit, Mother. I spend every waking moment doing the housework. Yet every day you bully me, I'm going crazy with stress. Don't be weak. You're just not doing the duty as a wife. As she said that, my mother-in-law took the smartphone out of my hand. Ah, well, you'll just have to sit there and reflect for a while. It's going to be cold tonight, but if you don't get hurt a little bit, you're not going to understand, right? Don't do it, Evelyn. If you lock me in a shed in the middle of the winter like this, I'd... Oh, by the way, you're a sickly one, aren't you? You think you'll make it till morning? Wait for the sun to rise, okay? Evelyn! Ignoring my protest, she slammed the storage door behind her. While I was still clinging to the door, I could hear the sound of a heavy padlock being locked. I heard my mother-in-law's footsteps walking away. I crumbled to the floor again. How cold. My mother-in-law's treatment of me was even more chilling than the cold feeling on my bare feet. And although she had always been a bully to me, I, who had a chronic bronchial disease, could not bear the thought of her going this far. I repeatedly coughed. I didn't think I'd make it to the morning. I might lose consciousness at this point. How could I have let this happen to me? I was choking on my own tears, and my groaning was almost inaudible. At that moment, Are you all right? The sound of banging on the door of the storeroom was a familiar voice to me. On the other side of the door, there seems to be someone struggling to unlock it, and in my mind's eye, I was replaying my encounter with that person in the fading scenery. I'm an ordinary full-time worker. I became a housewife at the age of 38. It's my first marriage, but I met my now husband relatively late. I spent my 20s taking care of my parents. By the time I took care of my father and mother, I was long past my mid-30s. I was working as a clerical worker for a small printing company, and I was managing to make ends meet. I felt like a weight had finally been lifted off my shoulders, but all that I, a person in her 30s, had left was time alone without my family. How empty. In the midst of my daily depression, Joshua, the man who would become my husband, approached me. Would you like to have dinner with me? He was a salesman for one of my clients, so he was in and out of my office frequently. Apparently, that's where he first met me. He was 36 years old at the time. He said he wasn't as strong as he was when he was younger, but from my point of view, I found him to be a very energetic and attractive man, especially since I had a chronic disease of the trachea and I was not a very active person. Maybe that's why my husband seemed more energetic to me. After 6 months of dating, we decided to make it official. When my husband proposed to me, saying, "It's time for me to get serious about my life," I said yes without hesitation. I think things were going well right from the start. He was kind to me. He allowed me to be a stay-at-home housewife because of my chronic illness. I'm fine as long as I get to drink the soup you make. My husband was not a very particular person. Except for his work, he had no hobbies or interests that would keep him out of the house. After we married, he got a promotion. He was disappointed that he had to travel a lot and work overtime. In our smooth-sailing marriage, there was only one problem: my mother-in-law. After our marriage, we moved in with my husband's parent. My husband's father passed away early in his life. He thought he could not leave his mother living alone. I was not opposed to moving in with my mother-in-law, and I wanted to be close to her because she had already lost her parents. I thought it would be good if the three of us could get along well with each other. That's what I thought. But, Jody, do you even know what it's like to be a wife? During the daytime, when my husband was at work, my mother-in-law said that coldly to me after I finished cleaning the living room. To be a wife? That's right. If you had such a mindset, you would not have done such a messy way of cleaning. I'm doing the best I can, though. It doesn't matter what you think. You're not related to me. Do you think you have that right? As a servant of this house, you are obligated to work like a cart horse. My mother-in-law was very harsh with me in this manner. She's a woman who usually gives an impression of meekness. At our pre-marriage meeting, she was just smiling at me, but when I entered the family, her attitude toward me was a little too much. It's no surprise that she puts all the housework on me, and if she doesn't like the food, she makes me cook it over, again and again. She makes me clean the same places over and over again, day after day. Especially bad was running errands by going to the Hanas. Whenever my mother-in-law didn't like something in the Hana hood, she would immediately send me to complain about it. "Oh, the Hana's baby is being so noisy today. How long are they going to let him cry at night? You go and warn them, Jody." But mother, the couple next door is still young, and the wife seems to be having a hard time raising their child. "We don't care about that. Are you saying that just because they are young, they are allowed to do whatever they want? Just go and shut the baby up. If I have to listen to that baby's noisy cries any longer, I'll lose my mind." Yes. Reluctantly, I had no choice but to visit my Hana's house. I pressed the intercom. A tired-looking woman answered the door. She was carrying a squirming baby on her chest. "I'm sorry. It's about the baby's cries, right?" Before I could say anything else, the woman bowed her head apologetically. I couldn't even say no. I had no choice but to listen to her. "I'm trying to be careful, but this baby, when he gets anxious, he can't stop crying." It's okay. I'm not here to complain. It seems it's tough for you to take care of him by yourself. I know how hard it is to be on your own." "Have you raised children before?" "No, I took care of my parents. I had no siblings, so I took care of them all by myself." "That must have been really hard on you." "So, I know how hard it is for you. You're lonely, right? You think you can't count on anyone, right? Especially when you're home alone?" My husband is too busy with work right now." As I said this, the woman burst into tears. I was surprised, but in the next moment, I involuntarily held up my hand. I touched the woman who looked like she was about to collapse, and said in the gentlest voice possible, "It's okay. This won't go on forever. Since he's a baby, it's just for now. I'm here to help you when you need it. As a neighbor. Don't hesitate to ask." "Okay, thank you," she replied with a shrug. Finally, the woman seemed to calm down. I went back to the house and made small talk with my mother-in-law. I couldn't say I felt sorry for the woman next door, so I explained to her that I had warned her as I was told. If I am sent to complain again in the future, I'll just help my neighbor out. In fact, many times after that, I became closer and closer to the woman next door and her baby. As a result, the baby cried less and less. However, my mother-in-law's harassment of me did not change. No, it got worse day by day. My husband's work got busier by the day, and she took advantage of his absence. My mother-in-law began to treat me like a servant. I was a slave to her demands 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Due to the irregularity of her demands, I could not sleep well. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to leave my mother-in-law's house. If I continued to stay in this house, I was going to lose my mind. In fact, my trachea was in bad shape. I wanted to get away from my mother-in-law as soon as possible, if not forever. At least until I felt better. I need to take shelter somewhere. When my husband left for a long business trip, I started to prepare for a night escape. On the day of my escape, I saw him off on his business trip. I went about my business as usual. I did what my mother-in-law ordered me to do. As much as possible, I tried to move as usual so that my mother-in-law would not notice. But I think my mother-in-law somehow noticed somewhere. Just as I was about to take my belongings out of the house, my mother-in-law stormed into my room. She had a wry smile on her face. "You're just trying to get away from me, huh? That's not going to happen. You have your duties as a servant." "I can't stand it any longer, Mother. I won't stay forever. At least a month, or even half a month. Let me rest elsewhere." "Don't say such a silly thing." "You didn't tell Joshua that, did you? I don't want him to be bothered with me. It's an important time for him at work, too." I hadn't discussed a single thing with my husband about this. As I said, one reason is that I don't want to bother my husband, but the other reason is that I wanted to let him know about my disappearance. While I was being harassed by my mother-in-law, he didn't notice a single thing about my distress. I tried my best to hide some of it from him. But still, as a married couple, I wanted him to be aware that his wife was in danger. If I had to run away in the night, my husband would understand that I was not in a normal state. So today's escape was completely my own decision. I knew you were a bad wife, but I didn't expect you to be this bad. Are you going to run away from this house and live with another man? How dare you? No, that's not it. I just couldn't stand your bullying. Don't talk like that. What bullying? I'm just educating you as a mother-in-law. That's why you're a parentless daughter. I can't believe you brought up my parents. I can't stand it. No matter what you say, I will leave this house. For now, I tried to take whatever I can to get my hands on, pushed my mother-in-law out of my way, and ran out of the room. But the moment I tried to push her away, I felt a pain in my chest. I felt as if I was choking. I almost collapsed on the spot. I knew my chronic illness was getting worse. But just as I thought that, my mother-in-law grabbed me by the arm and dragged me out of the room. What? I was startled. I found myself in the garden. The night air tingled on my skin. She pushed me off the porch. I wasn't even allowed to put on my shoes. Come here. I was forcibly led away. She took me to a shed in the yard and shoved me straight into the shed. The shed, which was usually full of tools for tinkering in the garden, was filled with an earthly smell. You'll have to reflect in here for a while. In here? You disobeyed me, didn't you? A servant has to know her place. Fortunately, Joshua is going on a business trip and won't be home for a while. I don't have to worry about anyone looking in on me. You can stay here for a few days and cool off. Wait a minute, I'm sick. I'm sure your body will respond well to the cold weather these days. It's a nice feeling. And with that, my mother-in-law closed the far door of the storage room with great force. While I hung on the door, I heard the sound of a heavy lock slamming shut with a clank. My mother-in-law really wants to lock me in here. Evelyn! Evelyn! I repeatedly banged on the door and yelled, but soon my chest began to ache. It was hard to breathe. It was cold. In addition, the earthly smell of the shed hurt my throat. If I don't do something, I'm really going to collapse here. If I lose consciousness, I'm finished. I'm so cold and dusty. I would never wake up again. Help me. I managed to squeeze that out. I slammed my hand against the door with all my might, but my energy would soon run out. I'm truly helpless. If I obeyed my mother-in-law, I would never live. Are you all right? I heard a voice just before I lost consciousness. When I looked up, I heard a familiar voice knocking on the other side of the door. With the last of my strength, I called out to the door. Help me. It was you after all. It's me, your neighbor, Hannah. Thanks for all your help with the baby. The woman was the young mom next door. My mother-in-law had said so noisy crying at night and made me go to the neighbor's house to complain to her. But actually, I had already helped her to take care of her child many times under the pretext of going there to warn her. Now my husband lives with us. I was worried about you. But why did you... There was a lot of noise outside. My husband and I were checking out what's going on. Then we saw you being shoved in the shed. We were so surprised. The shed was locked, though. I'll see if I can get it open, but this padlock is very strong. It seems that Hannah's husband was pulling the lock with all his might. But that didn't help with the metal lock. He said he would get some pliers and left a bit. And that's when all hell started to break loose. Although he brought the pliers, it was still no match for the padlock. The couple even brought out a hammer and saw. Even so, they didn't leave it to chance. The noise seemed to attract people from the neighborhood one after another. Finally, someone seemed to have called the police, and even the sound of the police sirens could be heard. Finally, my mother-in-law noticed the commotion in the yard and came back. There she met the police officer who had arrived at the scene. My mother-in-law was making some sort of lame excuse. Finally, the policeman said, "Bring me the key to the padlock." She then rushed back to get the key. I was released from the storeroom about 30 minutes after I was locked in. After a long night, I was in a daze and was carried straight to the hospital. By the next day, I was conscious, but the condition of my trachea was still unpredictable. So I was to stay in the hospital for a week for rest and recuperation. As for my mother-in-law, she was taken away by the police officer who came to the scene. She was taken to the police station for further questioning, where she was scolded extensively. I didn't do anything! At first, my mother-in-law was refusing to tell the truth. But Hannah and Nick recorded the whole thing on their smartphone. and so all of my mother-in-law's deeds became clear. In the recording, you could clearly see my mother-in-law pushing me into a storage room and padlocking the door. I couldn't thank the couple enough for coming up with the idea to record it. It must have been a great crime, but when the police asked, "Do you want to report it?" I shook my head. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. Above all, when my husband found out what had happened, he promised to remove my mother-in-law from the house. "Oh, I'm sorry I didn't see it before." After visiting me in the hospital room, he got down on his knees and apologized. My husband's pale expression made me feel afraid of him. In my stubbornness, it was my fault for not discussing it with him. We agreed to communicate well as a couple from now on, and so the problem between us was settled. When my mother-in-law was evicted from the house, she had no choice but to move to a cramped apartment by herself. She has no friends to visit her there, and she is living on her late husband's pension. She contacted me several times to apologize. I firmly refused her apology. I gave her an ultimatum that if she contacts me again, I told her that I'd talk to the police. I don't want anything to do with her anymore. I have a good relationship with the couple who helped me. It seems that their child will be starting kindergarten soon. I'm going to pop in and give my noisy neighbor a gift to celebrate his having started kindergarten.
Then, I'm getting a divorce.
Huh? Wait a minute. That's so sudden. See, that thing.
My husband was more flustered than I had ever seen him before. But it was my mother-in-law who spoke up here. Hey, Daniel, don't get upset. You're pathetic. You know what your mother always says. A wife listens to her husband. That's fine. She's divorcing you. It's outrageous for a wife to disobey her husband. If you don't like it, just leave.
No, well, that's true.
I'm not asking you to leave. I'm already divorced, so it's inevitable that I'll have to leave. You're a woman of few words. I didn't like her from the beginning. What a coincidence. I hated you from the very beginning too. My name is Clara, and I work for a company. My husband Daniel and I decided to get married after 6 months of dating, and we have been married for over 2 years. I loved his willingness to make decisions about things. I think this is largely due to my upbringing, as I am the middle child of 3 sisters. And although I am usually the softer of the two, I am the eldest, and I am also younger than my eldest sister. I am sandwiched between the eldest, who is usually soft and reserved, and the third, who is the youngest, but has great leadership qualities. Whenever we have family events or invited people from my father's business to our house, I always followed them. I can't say that such an environment affected me, but I am not good at deciding things. And the bigger the issue is, the more I think in circles. In the end, I always have a hard time coming up with a coherent thought. When I was living at home, I was able to live comfortably as long as I kept up with them. I think that's why I was able to rely on my husband's proactive approach to making decisions. However, I am more particular about things than most people. I am proud of this. I wonder if it is because we 3 sisters are close in age. When I was little, I was often scolded by my father for being jointly and severally responsible for my sister's actions, perhaps because of my father's personality. The older and younger sisters were quick to apologize to my father. I would never apologize if I didn't agree with him. I was made to sit on my knees as a punishment, and even after an hour or 2 had passed, I never apologized. My eldest sister got worried. Just say you're sorry and everything will be okay. She would say that in front of our father, and he continued to get even angrier at me. I caused a lot of trouble to my eldest and youngest sisters because of my persistence. Now it is one of our family's funny stories, but to put it simply, I would like to say, I leave it to others to make decisions, but I agree with myself. I am the kind of person who leaves decisions to others, but stubbornly refuses to agree to anything I don't agree with. My husband is a very special person who fell in love with me and asked me to marry him. Since my husband and I got married, our life has been peaceful. My husband, who knows all about my particularities, never steps into my points of view. I like this life very much. Then my husband suggested that we buy a home.
Hey, we have been married for 2 years already. Why don't we consider buying your own home soon?
Oh, that sounds great.
I know it's a long way off, but I want our kids to have a great time growing up. Besides, Clara, you got a lot of problems with renting, don't you?
Oh, yeah, I guess so. We've been living in a rented apartment since we got married, and I was concerned about the noise. If I slept in my bedroom, I would wake up at 5 a.m. to the sound of the TV set of the people living below me. On weekends, the residents next door sing loudly with guitars in their hands. My house was a corner room on the top floor of a 6-story apartment building. From the walkway in front of our front door, we could see the beautiful Diamond Head in the distance if it was a clear day. Some residents go out of their way to see it. They are sitting in front of our front door, talking with their phones in their hands and saying Diamond Head is so beautiful here. Some residents don't leave the spot for a long time. The guitar is at a noise level that my husband can hear. My husband can't hear the sounds of the resident below. So I am aware that my ears are too sensitive, but I was somewhat stressed about waking up at 5 a.m. every morning. Plus, I was very concerned about the sound I was making. I even wore fuzzy slippers to try to reduce the noise as much as possible. I tried to reduce the noise as much as possible by wearing fuzzy slippers, but my husband was walking with a thump with his bare feet. I was so stressed that I didn't want to bother people. Anyway, my head is working to avoid bothering other people. That's why I was so happy when my husband said, let's buy our own home. I was really happy that he took my personality into consideration, not to mention our children. My husband was determined to buy a custom-built home and was determined to start from the land. I agreed with him, and we spent our holidays looking for lands. We found the land within 3 months, and when it came to sign the contract,
I'm thinking $2 million for the land as a deposit and $3 million for the house. Is that okay?
okay, but how much do I have to pay?
You don't have to pay, Clara. I'll pay from my savings.
Aha, I see.
I'll pay the mortgage, so I want Clara to pay for living expenses.
Okay, let's do that. The roles of each of us were decided fairly easily. Then the search for a home builder began, and I, who was not particularly about a home builder, followed my husband's decision. However, when we finally signed the contract with the home builder and proceeded to the layout arrangement, my in-laws showed interest in it. Wait, you've already discussed the floor plan, right? Let me see it.
Oh yeah.
That day, as soon as they came to our house, they were all over the floor plan. Oh, this kitchen is no good.
What? Is it?
Yeah. What do you call the separate kitchen table? Irish kitchen, is it? Is it an island-style kitchen? Well, it doesn't matter what it's called either way, but not this one. The kitchen is in full view of the others. Make it an L shape. I don't care what you call it, but I do, don't you? Why does my mother-in-law get to decide? My husband preferred that style kitchen, so there's nothing wrong with that. Me and Daniel prefer an island-style kitchen, so there's no problem. Then my mother-in-law glares at me, and then my husband, who rushes to intervene.
Oh, well, it's still in the proposal stage, not a decision. Why don't we just talk about it some other time?
My husband's statement misses the point entirely. Instead, why can't he just say,
It's me and Clara's house, so it's none of your business, Mother.
After that, my mother-in-law kept saying that we should take more different styled room layouts, and the house should be barrier-free, and so on. She put words in my mouth as if she herself was a resident here. I remember my father-in-law also said that we should build a porch. I don't think so, but I think I should hit the nail on the head here. Hey, the new house is where Daniel and I are going to live, right? I posed the question to my husband after my in-laws got home.
Yes, that's right.
Only me, you, and the kids will live there, right?
Why?
Why? Because I'm not going to live with your parents.
Is that for life?
Yeah.
You don't have to say it so clearly.
If you don't make these things clear, you'll get into trouble later on. Besides, we talked about this when we started looking for a place, right? I told you that I would not live with my parents and I would not live with your parents. You agreed to that, didn't you?
Well, yes, but what about a lifetime? Even Clara's parents will have to take care of our child in the future.
They won't come. They are even looking for a home for the elderly, saying that children have their own life. And they already have a cemetery.
Isn't that a little bit too cold?
Cold? What do you mean?
No, that means you won't take care of your parents at all, right?
No, I will.
Oh, I don't understand.
If my parents are in trouble, I'll help them. That's a given. No matter how many nursing homes I look for, if my parents become sick, I will go and take care of them. What I don't tolerate is people who take it for granted that they have to take care of their children. My parents are people who try to avoid being a burden in their children's lives.
Does that mean my parents are people who are a burden to their kids?
To put it bluntly, yes. It means I can see glimpses of it. Because why do they meddle so much in our home affairs? We're independent, you know. If it's advice, I'll gladly accept it. But today, they're just trying to make themselves feel better. It looked to me like they were ordering us around because they're moving into a new house with us.
That's not true.
I see. Was I mistaken? Then I'm sorry. So even if we finish the new house in the future, I won't be living with your parents, right?
Never.
I see. I'm glad to hear that. I must have been mistaken. I'm sorry. I got the word out of my husband here that his parents would never live together. After that, his parents continued to meddle. This would be a straight line of living together no matter how you looked at it. If my in-laws are of good character, there is still some room to think about it. And if my husband had made it clear at the beginning that he wanted to live with them, there would be room to think about it in a certain way. I would have some room to think about it. However, I think my husband intends to force us to live together once the house is completed. And I don't like my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law is a gossipy person, and she is always looking for something to gossip about. There are several small houses right in front of my mother-in-law's house. My mother-in-law knows when they drive in and out and when they leave on their bicycles. She knows the whole process. This is because she peeks through the lace curtains every time she hears a sound. I am always disgusted by my mother-in-law's behavior. Well, if there is only one person like this in the neighborhood, I guess the security is protected to a certain extent. I hate my mother-in-law's behavior. I don't think she cares about other people. If someone is in trouble, you help them. That should be enough. And she only speaks ill of others, which I also dislike. My mother-in-law, when she opens her mouth, says that she doesn't hate me, that I'm not a bad person. But in the end, she always says bad things about people, and it leaves a really bad feeling to other people. She has a way of thinking that I cannot understand. And my father-in-law, who doesn't stop her. Sometimes they work together, listening through the curtains to see what the neighbors are up to. Sometimes they argue with each other about what to do and what not to do. It is hell for me to live with such parents-in-law. My husband also has a tendency to look down on people just like his parents. I never saw a glimpse of this before we got married. I am sure he hid it from me. Since we got married, my husband has been talking down to people. I noticed negative comments such as,
"He's useless. He can't do his job,"
and so on. As long as he belongs to the company, he thinks that way. However, it is the company that has decided to hire these people. We have nothing to say to them. They are probably working for the same company because they are expected to have a certain level of ability. It is a waste of time to pay attention to such things. It's not good for your mental health. But my husband seems to be keeping himself alive by denying someone else. I was a little disappointed in such a husband too, and now that disappointment is swelling into something bigger. If my husband forces me to live with his parents now, I will divorce him. When his parents made some remarks about the floor plan, I remained quiet. Then my in-laws started to show their own face and gave their demands to the architect without telling me. I guess this is completely out of the question now. At the beginning, he was asking how I was doing at first, but he was relieved that I wasn't saying anything anymore. I guess he was relieved. After that, he allowed me to say whatever I wanted to, and to my in-laws. Then a new house was built that embodied 100% of my in-laws' wishes. My husband was busy with the moving process, but we managed to get it done. The move was scheduled for tomorrow.
Well, let's go to our new house for a minute.
My husband smiled and spoke to me. We're going tomorrow anyway.
That's not going to happen. You have to watch where you put everything. Why aren't you so eager to do it? It's a new house, remember? I built this house for you.
How dare you? Who would want to live in a house that doesn't reflect any of my opinions?
And besides, I'm also disappointed that you didn't go to check on the house even once. It's disappointing.
Because I'm not interested.
Huh?
I'm not interested in a new house.
Oh, come on. Don't say that. You're making me angry.
My husband is quite excited about the new house, and I'm down in the dumps.
Anyway, let's go.
If this is the way it's going to be, I'll go. And when we arrived at the new house, we found that our familiar belongings had already been moved in. I knew it. Then my husband ran up the stairs and brought his parents who were waiting for him.
My parents are coming to live with us today, okay?
He said that? He really said it. Yes, then we're divorced. I still had about a micron of hope. My husband would keep his promise to me, I thought. This was a faint hope. I had nothing more to wonder about, but I decided to keep an eye on him for a while.
Hey, Clara, why are you being so quiet? The house is finished, so congratulations, right?
Not at all.
Oh, why not?
Because the no-good husband didn't keep his promise.
What?
You didn't keep your own promise.
Hugh, what are you talking about?
Hey, you idiot. Do you remember our promise?
What are you talking about?
Oh, you're aware that you are no good. I said I didn't want to live with your parents. And you told me that you wouldn't live with your parents either. Remember that?
This place. This is the house I built with my money.
So what?
I decide who lives in that house.
Oh, so?
I'm the one who decided to move in with my parents. You'll have to follow that.
So your promise to me was a lie?
Yes, I did. Because if I didn't say so, the house wouldn't be built.
Well, I don't understand what you mean by the house won't be built. So you lied to me when you said you would build a house for me?
No, it's true, I like you. But my parents are important too, so I'm sorry.
I see.
Clara, yes.
Then I'm getting a divorce.
Huh? Wait, that's so sudden. See, that thing.
My husband was more flustered than I had never seen him before. But it was my mother-in-law who spoke up here. Hey, Daniel, don't get upset. You're pathetic. You know what your mom always says. A wife listens to her husband. That's fine. She's divorcing you. It's outrageous for a wife to disobey her husband. If you don't like it, just leave.
No, well, that's true.
I'm not asking you to leave. I'm already divorced, so it's inevitable that I'll have to leave. You're a woman of few words. I didn't like her from the beginning. What a coincidence. I hated you from the very beginning, too. Just one last thing. Do you think you can pay the mortgage on this house with just Daniel's income?
Huh?
I knew it. You're mistaken that Daniel's income is enough to make it work. This house is in Daniel's name and the loan is in his name. He's borrowing the full amount calculated from his income. If we pay the loan with his income, who is going to cover the living expenses? Daniel also seems to have forgotten. It was me who would make the living expenses. You guys are already living on pensions, right? Poor you. You could be living in a new house. But you're going to have to pay for 3 people's living expenses with your pension. I'm sorry to hear that. No, Daniel, what's going on? You said you weren't going to collect a single penny from us.
That's, well...
Well then, it's no longer any of my business, so I'll be going. I left the place gallantly. The next day's move was actually already arranged so that only my belongings would be sent to my parents' house. I didn't want to give up hope about my husband until the very end, but given the reality of the situation, I think this was the right decision. After that, my husband and in-laws must have understood the reality of life not standing still in front of them. They came close to me afterwards, but their idea was to live together. There was no way I would accept that. But that is not the important thing. It was that they neglected me in favor of their own ideals. Besides, my personality is such that what I decide is unwavering, no matter what anyone says. In the end, the divorce took 6 months, but we managed to finalize it. After that, the newly built property seemed to have been given away, and less than 2 years after its completion, it was listed as an auction property. It seems they couldn't pay the loan after all. It's only natural, isn't it? Because I was calculating the money with 2 horsepower. I work for a real estate company, so it is one of my daily routines to check auction properties every step of the way. It was a relief to see that house come up for sale. I feel like my divorce is finally settled. I am currently building my own home. I'm single and building my own home, which smells like I'm going to be single for the rest of my life, but I'm fine with that. I am very particular. I'm sure that marriage will not work out for me. I will continue to enjoy being single.